Assalamu alaikum. I am Irfan Takalvi, and today we are discussing an important topic, that is possible cancellation of Pakistan's foreign debts in the wake of floods 2022. Well, we know that British MP Claudia Webbe has urged the world to cancel Pakistan's foreign debts after unprecedented floods have created huge destruction and losses in various parts of the country. After Claudia Webbe, some of her other colleagues in the House of Commons, the lower house of British Parliament, have also raised voice for this cause, that Pakistan's debts be cancelled in the wake of this unprecedented devastation that the country is facing right now. Now the question is, can the world really provide any meaningful and impactful debt relief, debt cancellation particularly, considering the devastation, the impact that floods of 2022 have inflicted upon Pakistan? Well, we can discuss it, but the immediate answer is that practically there seems to be very little chance for the same, very little chance for Pakistan getting any meaningful relaxation in its overall debt burden. Although the argument being forwarded by the likes of Claudia Webbe is very strong. She says that Pakistan contributes less than 1% to global carbon emissions, which are the main reason for global warming and climate change. But Pakistan at the same time becomes one among 10 most vulnerable nations facing severe consequences of climate change, being on the receiving end in a very, very negative way. She says, and it's quite right, that Pakistan is paying the price for our greed. By our, she certainly means the developed world, but yes, this word our may actually have many more connotations as well. But at the same time, we are also very clear that global financial system does not work on the basis of humanitarianism. It does not keep in view humanitarian needs of a country or a region while making its decisions. Its decisions are not dictated by sympathy. We should be very clear about that. If a country owes something, it has to pay it back. Whether you can pay it or not, whether you are able to pay it back or not, is your problem. It is not the problem of the creditors. It certainly is the problem of the indebted nation. Let us now look at the overall volume, the size of Pakistan's debt burden. Pakistan's total debt burden comes to the tune of 225 to 230 billion US dollars. Out of this, just less than half, close to 100 billion US dollars, is Pakistan's domestic debt. We all know that a huge chunk of Pakistan's annual budget for last so many years, it is consumed in paying interest on domestic debts that Pakistan owes mostly to its central bank and also to domestic commercial banks. Now this portion is such that the outside world can do very little about it. Now we come to Pakistan's external loans, foreign debts, which amount to 125 to 130 billion dollars currently. Most of these are divided into the following four categories. Bilateral loans that Pakistan has got directly from the creditor nations. Then there are multilateral loans by institutions like International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which has been established a few years back, and some other multilateral institutions. Pakistan also owes significant amounts to foreign commercial banks and institutions in the form of bonds and other instruments. It is also an important thing to note currently that in Pakistan's overall foreign debt, the share of China is continuously increasing. Some estimates say that it has already reached some 1/4 to 30% of Pakistan's total international debt burden. Cancellation of foreign loans is not a simple phenomena. When a decision about cancelling the loans of any nation is made, a lot of political, diplomatic and strategic dynamics come into play. Well, those having an eye on the global economic and financial dealings and wheelings, they know that cancellation of foreign loans is not a simple phenomena. When a decision has to be made about cancellation of debts of any nation, any group of nations, a lot of political, diplomatic and strategic dynamics come into play. And it is also a reality that Pakistan of today is seemingly not standing on the side that most of the Western nations view as the right side if we look at the global picture. Regionally and globally, this is becoming increasingly true, and Western nations, especially the US, they have a lot of weight in decision making of the international institutions, international financial institutions like IMF, the World Bank, the ADB. Although gradually China is becoming an important player, but still the decision making power lies with the West, the US, Europe, Japan and other allies of the West. It's also a reality that globally the calls for climate compensation, climate credit are gaining ground. But still, considering the overall global and regional picture, Pakistan may have to wait for some more time to be among the top beneficiary states of such compensations and credits. At the same time, we should also be very clear that transparency in government spending and Pakistan's huge defense expenditure, although it is way less than what Pakistan spends on repaying its loans, but it still may be a factor in decision making by the international players regarding cancellation of Pakistan's debt burden. So the question now is, what would happen to Pakistan's international debts considering this ongoing devastation by the floods and global calls for cancellation? We can see that countries have already offered and would continue to offer millions, in some cases tens of millions of dollars in aid for flood victims, immediate flood relief, most of which is and which will be in kind, not any direct financial assistance coming to Pakistan's kitty. In coming days, some Western countries may announce some debt cancellations of small amounts. Some particularly Western countries and institutions may offer relaxation, relief in repayment of outstanding loans. Loans that we have to pay in coming months and years, or interest on those loans. The same thing also happened in 2020 when the G20 countries announced their debt relief for developing nations in the wake of COVID-19 virus and the economic impacts that it inflicted on the developing nations. China is an important creditor for Pakistan, but with China, Pakistan has a different kind of story. Most of the dealings are bilateral, government to government. Yes, Pakistan can get some meaningful relief as far as Chinese loans are concerned, but that will also be mostly in the form of increase in enhancement in the repayment period of loans that Pakistan has to repay to China. Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other Arab nations would actually prefer a rollover of the loans that they have already given to Pakistan, and Pakistan has to repay those loans. Again, it will be a relaxation in the period of repayment or the contractual period of the maturity of those loans. It may not be any cancellation or waiver, even partial one. International Monetary Fund, international financial institutions, development financial institutions may provide some relaxation again in repayment period. Plus, the strategy on part of these institutions usually is to offer new loans to repay the older loans, not the cancellations or waivers. So we can say that in the long term we may actually see very little meaningful and impactful relief. What to talk about full cancellation? Full cancellation in this situation, in the present circumstances, is simply out of question visibly. This MP Claudia Webbe, she has raised this voice, and of course, as is understandable, Pakistanis in general and British Pakistanis in particular must thank Claudia Webbe. She is the MP from Leicester for highlighting Pakistan's case in this very critical situation. We know that, we realize that Pakistan's debt burden is actually the cause for many of its economic problems. So highlighting this cause for Pakistan is actually a great help. She is also a member of the Foreign Relations Committee of the House of Commons, and also a member of Environment Related Committee. So if she is talking about it, we can say that a right person is raising voice on Pakistan's debt. But at the same time, we cannot ignore that her brief political career as an MP so far, roughly 3 years, it has been a controversial one. When she was nominated to this constituency from Labour Party, some reservations were expressed by the British Indian community on her nomination. She also did not win. She did win the constituency, but she did not win with any high majority. She got say 6,000 plus votes in a constituency of over 70,000 votes, and very recently she has been faced with a harassment case, harassment of a lady, which resulted in Miss Claudia's suspension from the Labour Party, and now she sits in the House of Commons as an independent member. In this scenario, we cannot be sure that how much influence she actually has on the decision making of her own government, what to say, on global decision making. But at the same time, she certainly has become a hero for Pakistanis worldwide, particularly those in Britain, and it would not be wrong to say that it may be good for the future of our political career, as the votes of British Pakistanis in Britain elections do matter considerably. We can say that Claudia and her colleagues in the House of Commons of the UK have certainly won the hearts of Pakistanis by campaigning for the cancellation of Pakistan's loans or some relief in Pakistan's international debts after these catastrophic floods that Pakistan is facing this year in 2022. But at the same time, global circumstances make it very clear that any substantial debt cancellation may well be a far cry. Pakistan will have to repay, and for any meaningful relief, it may have to wait for long. Thank you very much.